40 years ago, this Cape Town harbour was a stretch of derelict dockyards and forgotten greatness. But between the abandoned warehouses and the ocean lay a buried treasure of untold stories. The complex history of South Africa's first colonial port.
A sailing ship has to make landfall after about 2 or 3 months. And the only place which is in the right spot and had the right ingredients was the Cape of Good Hope.
Over the centuries, this harbour has been frequented by the best and worst of humanity, from all nations, ranks and places. The buildings and wharfs, monuments to a maritime legacy. Today's custodians are tapping into this rich history to build a foundation for the future. This is Cape Town's waterfront. This is Inside Africa. Cape Town's Victorian Alfred Waterfront is South Africa's most visited landmark. It boasts 24 million visitors a year. Built upon and around the city's harbour, the iconic Table Mountain is its backdrop. Its unmistakable silhouette has been a beacon for sailors for centuries.
It's a fascinating history as to why Table Bay became the port for Cape Town. And it's quite simply, it is the most sheltered area in Cape Town. So the mountain is the most influential thing in Cape Town, and it's the mountain which dictated that this was the calmest water, the safest place for these massive sailing ships to come and berth.
Despite its stature as a welcoming port, the modernization of shipping fundamentally altered the area's prospects.
Containerization requires a deeper harbour, it requires space for mechanized equipment, as opposed to the lots and lots of wooden finger jetties which had hundreds of people running around with sacks of different product. So in common with many places around the world, this port in the 70s, with the advent of containerization, became redundant and actually fell into disuse and dereliction relatively quickly.
Today, a group of visionaries in the city have reclaimed this space by using history to its advantage. The climax of the redevelopment has been the transformation of an abandoned silo into a new museum that has put the art world on notice.
This is a grain silo, it's a piece of infrastructure. It's a 100-year-old building, which was actually derelict. So what we've done is we've repurposed that building in a way that no other grain silo has ever done. This one you can actually understand exactly how these 60-metre tall buildings worked and operated. And we've kind of used that as an attraction, if you like, to bring people into the museum.
This towering edifice was built at the turn of the last century to connect Africa's grain trade to sea traffic. It was the tallest building in sub-Saharan Africa, dwarfing the port on which it stood. Instead of knocking it down, it's been hollowed out from the inside.
We managed to get hold of some of the original corn, and we digitally scanned the shapes of those, and then we picked one of those and enlarged that digital information to be 10 stories high. And so you use that one grain of corn, in a way, as the cutting device to give this building a heart.
An architectural and engineering feat. The project required 5 million man-hours from a diverse team of labourers and specialists.
The thing with concrete is that when you pour concrete, it sets after a day or so, but the full chemical curing of the concrete, so it achieves full hardness, can take up to a century. And so we were working on a building that was just achieving full hardness after almost a century, and then trying to cut through that.
The Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art, Africa, has caught the world's attention. Nobel laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu came out of retirement to help open its doors.
And now the moment we've been waiting for.
Our idea was that this building had stored trillions of grains of corn, had moved vertically through each of these silo units. Most of our work was about enhancing what the building had already. And that's something that you can't build new. You could never build this new. And so I feel almost like we've borrowed history and are taking credit for it when it's not really ours.
The silo is not the only historical landmark embedded in the waterfront. Close by, under a bank, is the Chavons Battery. Constructed in 1726, its cannons guarded Cape Town.
And for 140 years, it was out of sight. We knew everything about it. Which way it pointed, what guns it had, everything. But we'd never seen it. And then, when the waterfront company started up, they knocked down the fish factory that was standing on top of it, they excavated it.
Ever since he was a boy, accompanying his father down to the docks, Willem Steenkamp was deeply curious about how the port was established. Now he inspires the next generation.
In the old days, 400 years ago, the people here started trading with people there. Cape Town changed the course of world history, because without this big trade, things would have been a lot different. It took a journey of 6 to 8 months to get to the Far East and back again. They had to have a halfway house, a replenishment station. I think of it as sort of a 17th century version of a truck stop.
Steenkamp has coached the younger tour guides, teaching them the art of storytelling as well.
Many, many years ago, this used to be a power station. It was the first power station in Africa to generate electricity. So in other words, the first electric lights to be switched on in Africa. With that being said, Cape Town basically gave birth to the rest of Southern Africa, hence being called the Mother City.
But there is also a less celebrated side to the docks. For centuries, it was the place from which political prisoners were dispatched to the barren island on the horizon. The most famous of these is South Africa's political hero, Nelson Mandela. Today, tours leave daily for a glimpse of one of the world's most famous prison cells.
Robben Island is also the representation of Nelson Mandela, the struggle heroes, and this transition from the horrible apartheid era into the new South Africa, and how it was done with compassion, with peace, how this reconciliation happened, and it's a model for the world.
Before apartheid, convicts who helped build the port were held in another prison.
We are currently in the grounds of the old breakwater prison, and behind me is the treadmill. The treadmill was used for punishment for the prisoners. It's similar to how a hamster runs in a cage. So you actually have to manually pedal this wheel in a circular direction. And the wardens would make it slower or faster, and you actually have to keep up with the pace of this treadmill. If not, you could knock your knees or your ankles on the wooden planks of the treadmill, and there could be quite a lot of blood shed in this area.
Where walls once imprisoned, they now liberate through knowledge. Today, the Breakwater Prison is a business school. And beyond, a working harbour, home to many a fisherman whose stories are also woven into the tapestry of this waterfront.
And return safely to port through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Since discovery of oil in the 1990s, this country has experienced a transformation. Using its natural resources to fuel an expansion in infrastructure, as well as investing in the future of its people. Building towards a diverse and prosperous future. This country is Equatorial Guinea.